Today's video has been sponsored by War Thunder, more on that later.
Hello everyone, this little video essay is being cross-posted between Spacedock and Rowan J. Coleman's channel, the first of several of these cross-posts we're trying out. So if you're coming to this from Rowan's fans, or if you're a more recent Spacedock fan who's not familiar with me, my name is Daniel Orritt, I'm the original founder of Spacedock, and I'm a professional science fiction writer. I've contributed work to The Expanse, Star Trek Online, Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, and more, and I'm the lead writer and executive producer of The SOJOURN, an award-winning science fiction audio drama. I've learned a hell of a lot across my career, and I'd love to share some thoughts on the writing of space battles, by taking a look at the Battle of Proxima III from the 4th season of Babylon 5, and breaking down why I think it's a simply superb example of writing space action. This video will naturally contain spoilers. Hello, it's Dan from the future here, and as we were in the process of editing this video, I was still on a bit of a Babylon 5 kick, and I was doing some research and stumbled into this video by an excellent channel called Phintasmo that I'd never heard of or seen before, and realised that it really does draw pretty much all the same conclusions I draw in this video. Clearly this is a person of excellent taste and media analysis ability, and I did think, oh, do we want to cancel this video because it's already been done really well on YouTube, but we didn't want to cancel a 20-minute long thing that we'd made. So this is me saying that you should also watch this other one. It's a great video, and I also took the time to watch some of their other B5 stuff last night, and it's really good. So full credit to them for having done this first. Please do go and check them out, and I hope you will nevertheless stick around for the rest of this one. Right, let's get back to it. The Battle of Proxima III falls in the second half of the 4th season of the show, 17 months after the fascist Earth president Morgan Clark, having assassinated his predecessor, finally declares martial law, quickly leading to the occupation of Mars and prompting the Earth colonies of Orion 7, Proxima III and Babylon 5 to secede from the Earth Alliance and declare independence, kicking off the Earth Alliance civil war. Since the few battles around the breakout of war, the conflict has largely cooled for much of this time, but the Earth Resistance, in collaboration with Captain Sheridan's Army of Light, has now launched its aggressive campaign to liberate the occupied Earth colonies and eventually Earth itself. Their first objective will be to break the blockade of Proxima III, a Resistance-aligned colony that has been under blockade by Clarkist forces for much of the war, bringing us to the start of Season 4, Episode 15, No Surrender, No Retreat. In an old Spacedock video called How to Write a Space Battle, which has since been courteously demonetized by YouTube for reasons known only to them, I laid out a number of rules for good space action. The first of these rules was that fewer ships is better than more, and that the audience should be given a tangible understanding of all of these ships, their position and abilities, their names, and if possible the names of their commanders. This is a perfect first step towards creating a battle that does not feel like a giant, incomprehensible furball of CGI. And this episode of Babylon 5 is so eager to fulfill this rule that it manages it within 30 seconds of the title card. In B5's War Room, Marcus immediately gives us everything we need to know about the situation, both strategic and specific, and all without the dialogue ever sounding especially clunky or inorganic. We learn there are 6 Earth Force destroyers arrayed between Proxima III and the Proxima III jump gate, immediately giving clear geography to the battle. He also gives us the names of all the captains, which for this episode in particular is critically important to its thematic explorations, which I'll explore more later.
War Thunder is an enormous PvP combat game featuring thousands of tanks, ships and aircraft from across the world, spanning over a century of development from the earliest examples right up to the modern day. Whether you prefer something more arcadey or more like a simulator, or even in between, there's something for everyone in this highly detailed game. And it's not just the visual models, which you can customize, the damage done is also detailed down to individual parts. This is one of my favourite features because not only does it make your shots really matter, but it makes the game feel so much more authentic. You can play War Thunder for free right now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox and mobile by checking out the link in the description and pinned comment below. If you're a PC or console player and haven't played for 6 months, or if you're brand new, then you'll also get a bonus pack filled with boosters, 100,000 Silver Lions currency, premium vehicles and 7 days of premium account time to get you going. There's even an exclusive Eagle of Valor decorator, but this bonus pack is time limited. So remember, check out the links below to play War Thunder for free.
First though, I've lamented in past videos about how so many space battles in fiction seem to essentially consist of 2 fleets clashing at a nondescript block of space to fight to complete annihilation over no particular position or objective. This is harshly at odds with everything history teaches us about warfare. As a military fiction writer, it's best to always remember that the purpose of a battle is to defeat the enemy and to achieve a strategic goal. The destruction of enemy units, the killing of enemy troops, is a means to this end and rarely the end unto itself. Sometimes the simple destruction of a fighting unit can be the strategic objective, like for instance the hunt for the Bismarck, but far more often there's something specific you're trying to achieve that the enemy is trying to prevent. Field battles in historical warfare are extremely rare compared to sieges and blockades, which tend to be the primary means by which a war is fought. The reason for this is that more often than not, a force that does not wish to be engaged in combat by a superior force can almost always quite easily prevent itself from being drawn into action, meaning a field battle is only likely to be fought if the forces are sufficiently closely matched that both commanders believe they can win strongly enough to willingly engage. The best piece of media I've seen for visualizing this is the Mount and Blade games. If you've ever played them, you'll know that on a strategic level, you're mostly restricted to driving smaller forces away from important positions, or if you get lucky, cornering them somewhere where they can be forced into action. No such problem in this B5 episode, as the larger strategic situation conspires to force a battle in this stretch of space between Proxima III and its jump gate, an area the Clarkists must hold to continue preventing supplies from reaching the rebel planet, and which must be taken back by the Resistance if the planet is to be liberated. Unlike Babylon 5's other big recent conflict, the Shadow War, the Earth Alliance Civil War is a war not of gods and demons but of people, and that is where Babylon 5's writing is always at its best. In this episode it seeks to depict the moral complexity of a civil war, and in so doing fulfills another of my rules for a good space battle, always remembering that ships are containers full of people. The reason we're given the names of all the participating captains right away is because this is to be as much a battle of ideology as a battle of arms. Not every captain in the blockading force is a hardline Clarkist, willing to murder civilians or fire on resistance members. Some of them certainly are, but most are dedicated and professional ship captains trying to do their jobs to the best of their abilities, and each has a varied set of principles determining what they will and will not do. Sheridan does not want a battle of annihilation here, and seeks to avoid casualties if he can. He's also hoping to cultivate the best possible environment for doubting Clarkist captains to potentially defect if they might wish to. The Clarkist force is commanded by Captain Trevor Hall of the EAS Heracles. Hall is one of only 2 captains in this battle who Sheridan does not know by reputation, as both he and Captain Morgenstern of the Pollux have evidently been promoted very recently, likely for loyalty to President Clark rather than competence. Both of these ships have recently been recorded willingly firing on civilian targets, and Sheridan correctly predicts that they are immovably loyal to Clark. Where exactly on the spectrum of loyalty and personal morality the other captains fall, Sheridan cannot confidently say, and intends to engage them only to disable or rout, giving constant opportunities to defect or surrender. Before the battle begins, we get yet more excellent strategic content, often missing from TV and film battles. We see intelligence gathering and reconnaissance being performed. Marcus, who is positioned in hyperspace with a small vanguard of white stars, communicates with the Martian resistance to try and gather more information about the specific loyalties of the various Earth Force destroyer captains. Strategic misdirection and feints are also included here, adding yet more research, realism and truth to military history. Sheridan sends reconnaissance sorties of white stars to Mars and Earth, intending to mislead the enemy into believing one of those planets is his target, thereby occupying any Earth Force units that might otherwise have been able to reinforce Proxima III. We also see the specific nature of B5's setting's FTL system being used in innovative and believable ways. In the Babylon 5 setting, hyperspace is essentially laid over normal space. So when we see the EAS Heracles launching its routine combat air patrol to scout the local space, it also sends one of its Thunderbolt fighters into the local jump gate to poke its head around the local hyperspace. This is obviously something that would be necessary in this setting, as a hostile force could conceivably be waiting in hyperspace to launch an ambush into normal space, which in this instance is exactly the case. It's immediately clear to the audience that this battle is not going to be a screen full of hundreds of ships blasting each other in a giant colourful soup. We're going to be given a very clear idea of what's going on, and the 2 fleets are not simply going to slam into each other in full force. Sheridan intends to attack in 3 waves, each with a very specific tactical purpose. The first and smallest of these waves is deployed from hyperspace to the far side of Proxima III, and immediately detected by the EAS Heracles. Captain Hall, suitably characterized as a man promoted for loyalty above skill, immediately and wrongly assumes that these white stars are unaware that they've been detected, and believes himself to have the advantage. But Hall is never portrayed as an idiot. In fact, no one in this battle is. He leaves most of his force in position, sending 2 of his destroyers to confront the threat, and even wisely ensures that one of these 2 ships is the Pollux, making certain that a reliably loyal vessel is always present to monitor the behaviour of his less dedicated captains. This is a mixed result for Sheridan, who is monitoring the situation from hyperspace. He succeeded in splitting the defending force into 2 groups who could be defeated in detail, but the choice of ships has slightly frustrated his plans to isolate less loyal ships and put them in an easy position to defect. All of these updates, by the way, are concisely written and organically presented in brief scenes of Sheridan and Hall on their respective command decks, never over-explaining or hampering pacing, with no character ever delivering exposition for the audience's benefit only. The information is only communicated through reports and orders of the kind that would absolutely be seen in any such action. The second wave of white stars now leaves hyperspace, directly targeting the Heracles and her formation. Heracles fires first in a display of some seriously gnarly sound design, and the battle begins in earnest. This creates an important moment of tactical decision for Captain Hall, which is very deftly portrayed. The Nemesis and Pollux, previously dispatched to engage the first wave of white stars, now ask if they should reverse course to help defend their flagship. Captain Hall, again never portrayed as an idiot, makes his wisest choice of the battle here, ordering them to proceed with their current orders and engage the first wave of white stars. Countless times in history, the rapid countermanding of orders, or overlapping commands, have created the moments of confusion necessary to ensure defeat, and Hall at this moment seems to recognise this. He knows he's facing a force of nimbler ships than his own, and mentions that calling his 2 ships back would only see them hit on their flank by the first wave of white stars once they caught up to them. At least by keeping to their current orders, they get to engage their targets in an attack posture, hopefully defeating them quickly enough that they can return to assist the rest of the Clarkist fleet without dragging a potentially encircling enemy force into their wake. Now we get the thematic meat of the episode. As Sheridan emerges from hyperspace leading the 3rd and largest wave of White Stars and Star Furies, he broadcasts a plea to the Clarkist ships for them to surrender and to stop following illegal orders. Breaking radio silence against orders, Captain Edward McDougan of the EAS Vesta speaks up, evidently a former Academy instructor remembered by Sheridan. This interaction is brilliant, because it makes a very sympathetic case for a captain in McDougan's position. He clearly doesn't like President Clark, but Captain McDougan clearly values his own loyalties to the institutions of the Earth Alliance. He believes in the letter of the law and in the Articles of War. To his understanding, Proxima III has illegally declared independence, and working to resolve this situation simply falls within his responsibilities as an Earth Force captain. A character in this episode will later say it's not the role of the military to dictate policy, and that sentiment is at the heart of the moral conflict for most of the captains in this battle. Defections and changing loyalties can often be portrayed in simplistic and reductive ways in fiction. An example that springs to mind is Iden Versio in Star Wars Battlefront 2. The events which turn her against the Empire are thinly written and unconvincing, but even if they were convincing, they make no attempt whatsoever to justify why she would then join the Rebel Alliance. The story frames it such that if she has left the Empire, she must conditionally join the rebellion. These are simply the only available options. This episode of Babylon 5 shows us the antithesis of this. Many of these captains do not wish to follow illegal orders in support of a fascist dictatorship, but neither do they want to throw in their lot with an illegal resistance movement. Naturally, they're concerned about the personal consequences of either choice, and their first priority is their responsibility to the people under their command. Until now, they've kept their heads down and looked out for their own crews, trying their best to avoid having to carry out any distasteful orders and hoping the conflict would blow over. But now they are forced into making choices. Across the next few minutes, we see basically every notch on the dial of possible choices in this situation played out by each of the Clarkist captains. The Vesta neither immediately defects nor comes to the aid of the Heracles. She sits idle for a few moments as Captain McDougan processes his decision, and finally his choice is to simply stand down. He informs Captain Hall that he will not engage in support of illegal orders, and attempts to sit out the battle. An even more interesting variation of this plays out shortly later with the EAS Furies. Sheridan is unable to get any response at all from this ship, and we can assume this is because her captain is unwilling to even be on the record as having communicated with this rebel leader if the battle should go in the Clarkists' favour. Seeming to understand this, Sheridan broadcasts that he will approach the Furies, and if she does not fire, he will declare the ship non-combatant, taking the burden of choice and agency away from the Furies. Ultimately, the Furies takes this silent offer and also sits out the battle. The EAS Juno, also displaying an incredibly human reaction to these morally complex events, simply quits the field entirely, fleeing into hyperspace. It's worth mentioning that throughout the action, the visuals brilliantly support the respective styles of each force, as well as small bits of flavour dialogue. Sheridan clearly understands he's commanding a larger force of smaller vessels, and tries to avoid splitting it up too much and reducing how much of its aggregate firepower he can bring to bear against individual targets. We also get numerous in-cockpit shots of Star Furies, and the general tension and horror of the whole situation is excellently conveyed. Not content with the personal and moral complexity it's already brought to this battle, the script then hits us with a fascinating extra development, reminding us that these ships are not monoliths, when Captain McDougan's ambitious XO, at the urging of Captain Hall, mutinies and relieves the captain of command. The Vesta is briefly fighting on the Clarkist side before a counter-mutiny takes place off-screen, and Captain McDougan is restored to command, once again standing the ship down. Another great moment now arrives as the EAS Pollux, easily the least sympathetic of the Clarkist ships involved, having destroyed a convoy of 10,000 civilians in the previous episode, is struck by the wreck of a disintegrating White Star and mortally damaged. Sheridan has been fighting to disable, so the imminent destruction of the Pollux has been at least partially an accident. As Sheridan watches the ship fail to evacuate in time and be lost with all hands, the scene is portrayed with an overtone of horror. We know there can be up to 1,000 people crewing each of these Omega-class destroyers, and while many of them may have been enthusiastic Clark supporters, many others will have simply been following orders to the best of their ability. Despite everything the Pollux has done, this moment is portrayed as one of horrific and needless tragedy. The destruction of the Pollux prompts the EAS Nemesis to signal her surrender, again displaying an extremely common reality of historical warfare that is conspicuously absent from most science fiction. At the Battle of Trafalgar, a grand total of 1 ship was actually sunk in the action itself, the French 74-gun ship of the line, Aquille. Of the 33 ships in the defeated Franco-Spanish fleet, 17 surrendered and the rest were routed. Surrenders and routs for much of history have been far more common than fighting to complete destruction. This certainly changed with the industrialization of warfare, as ships and ground units became capable of destroying each other quickly and at great range, but the essential human nature of warfare remains, and depicting ships as willing to surrender rather than be destroyed adds a sense of realistic humanity to any story. The battle finally reaches its end when the same choice of surrender is placed before Captain Hall of the Heracles, and his unwillingness to stand down is clearly motivated by fear that he will be executed on the orders of President Clark if he does. The unforgiving nature of a fascist regime has manoeuvred him into a lose-lose scenario here, where he feels he may as well fight to the death. It's interesting to note this as an essential failing of such an unforgiving ideology. If Hall felt he could safely withdraw at this point without finding himself on the gallows, it would have preserved an obviously loyal and now battle-hardened ship and crew for the Clarkist cause. But here the cruelty and inflexibility of fascism fails itself as ever it does, and the Heracles and Captain Hall are lost to the Clarkists, thankfully without further bloodshed, as Hall's XO takes the ship by mutiny and surrenders. In the wake of the battle, we get a conference scene including all of the captains who have not fled or been killed in the action, and this scene is at least as excellent as the battle itself. In science fiction, we're used to watching stories about captains, protagonists burdened by the responsibility of command and required to exercise judgment on behalf of hundreds of service people for whom they are responsible. In any given episode of Star Trek, or even a different episode of B5, the moral authority lies with the captain alone, and whatever final decision they make is driven by balancing their duty to their charges with their own principles. But in this room, at the end of this episode, there are 5 captains, each one the protagonist of their own story, each one burdened by their own responsibilities and their own values. Sheridan makes a classic third-act monologue as he attempts to convince the other captains to join his rebel cause, but the script deftly avoids the cliché of having his speech instantly win everyone over. Even the captains interested in joining him are not about to make such a decision on a whim, and Captain McDougan asks that they be given time to talk it over. We only hear the results a couple of scenes later. Once again we see a range of deeply human choices. Commander Levitt, the new captain of the Heracles, expresses distaste for Clark, but refuses to participate in an armed rebellion, choosing instead to take her ship to the neutral colony of Beta 9 to sit out the rest of the war. Captain Eklund of the Furies, who had previously been cautious about talking to Sheridan on an open channel, again displays now characteristic caution and compromise in her decision, choosing to side with the resistance, but only in the capacity of remaining at Proxima III to hold it, being unwilling to participate in aggressive action against Earth Force ships. This characterization is achieved even in spite of the fact that Captain Eklund speaks no lines of dialogue whatsoever in the entire episode. Only her actions and some brief body language shots communicate this highly consistent and believable attitude. Captains Kagawa and McDougan of the Nemesis and Vesta choose to join the resistance in earnest, accompanying Sheridan's force for the rest of the campaign. The Battle of Proxima III achieves a balance almost never seen in science fiction screenwriting, as it weaves together grounded, well-researched and believable combat tactics with gripping human drama, all the while maintaining accessibility and clarity to its audience. The battle is exciting, well-paced and always easy to follow. Its layout is clear, its stakes well represented, and its participants strikingly three-dimensional. Even Babylon 5 itself has often been guilty of the far more common depiction of sci-fi space action as a giant, confusing malaise of 1,000 ships with no clear objective. And to me, this distinction is what makes the show's Earth Alliance Civil War arc vastly superior to the previous Shadow War arc, even in spite of that arc's many qualities. This change in presentation pairs perfectly with the thematic intent that distinguishes the two story arcs and the two conflicts. Far from being grand and mythic, the Earth Alliance Civil War is a smaller war, but a war of people, a messy war, a tense and ethically complicated war, and a profoundly human war. Here, in the second half of its fourth season, Babylon 5 achieves what I hold to be the apex of its writing quality, never missing a beat or wasting a line in capturing the personal struggles of a civil conflict, while retaining as much excitement and spectacle as the Shadow War. It provides a perfect object example of how you don't need 1,000 ships and a cosmic existential threat to craft a great war story, and in fact it can be the very absence of those things which makes it great. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off.
Remember to check out War Thunder for free on console and PC using the links below to get your time-limited bonus pack of boosters, 100,000 Silver Lions, premium vehicles and 7 days of premium account time, as well as the Eagle of Valor decorator. And there's a mobile version too! You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate, fighter and carrier design reference books, as well as 1 week early access to upcoming videos. Thanks to our supporters and thank you for watching.